All right, everybody, welcome into the show here, and I have a guest. First ever guest on the show is Josh Pate. You can follow his show on all socials on YouTube. Josh Pate's College Football Show, the future commissioner of college football. You're just gonna get into a few college football questions, and then a few questions at the end about just some advice you could give anyone getting into sports media, and then I wanted to ask you about storm chasing a little bit at the end too. But the first question I had was, you're in your Pate State Speaker Series. I was wondering, what was your favorite head coach of all time to interview?
Mac Brown, when he was at North Carolina, was favorite. I still keep in touch with him today. Talked to him last week about it. We went over there 2 years ago, I guess it was. I'd never met Mac in person. We had, talked via text a few times. And so we went there, sat down with him. Mac Brown, man, he never meets a stranger. So that's his aura. That's his personality. So you get it immediately when you're talking to him. And I remember at the time I had myself with me, one other assistant, and my producer who worked with me at the time, who's been around the industry a long time. She's worked Super Bowls, national championships. She's covered everything. So she's been around a lot of people. And I remember midway through me and Mac talking, I catch out of the corner of my eye, she's just over there crying because Mac Brown's off talking about story after story and talking about his wife and the impact that she's had. And I just remember walking away thinking, man, we normally go about 30 or 40 minutes on these things. I think we went an hour and a half, had to cut it down to an hour. And there was some football in there, but it was probably 75+% just life. And I don't really ever go into those things with notes. So I just kind of let it go where it's going to go. And man, I loved that one. Loved it. And then shortly thereafter, he's not at North Carolina anymore. So that was the only chance that we got to do that. But yeah, Mac Brown, that's the sort of the bar against which all of our other interviews and all of our other sit downs are measured.
Yeah, I remember watching that interview. I really enjoyed it. I did. Mac Brown, I think I did my top 10 head coaches all time, and I threw Mac Brown in at 10. A lot of people had pushback, and I was like, you look, he's one of the few coaches who has a national championship. Texas, he was phenomenal there, so I threw him at there. And then I was going to ask you another question. Which team do you think in 2026 will have the most surprising season? Maybe a team that wasn't top 25 or that wasn't supposed to make the playoff or even just have a good season. What team do you think could surprise some people in 2026?
I wouldn't go as far as to say playoff, but I've got an eye on Oklahoma State because Oklahoma State was horrific record-wise last year. And then you've got a guy who's been there forever in Mike Gundy, who's out. So it's been a long time since we talked about a new coach and a new much of anything at Oklahoma State. So Eric Morris was guy that takes the job from North Texas. And I think if you've paid attention to what Indiana just did, I'm not going to go as far as to say the Indiana blueprint or the Indiana model or anything like that. But if you watch what Curt Cignetti did, he went from JMU to Indiana, and he took a critical chunk of his staff and his roster with him. It's the same thing Eric Morris just did. And not only that, it's one thing if you come from a place that's decent at the G5 level and bring decent G5 level players up to the Power 4 level. Well, you're probably not going to achieve a whole lot with that. But if you bring really, really, really good players, those guys translate anywhere. And whether it was the quarterback position, the tailback position, several other positions, there were guys on that North Texas roster that came with Eric to Stillwater that could have gone many, many other places that litter the preseason odds to win conferences or make the college football playoff. So I don't know if I would say, man, watch out, they could win 9 games or anything like that. But I think they were 2-10 last year. Mm-hmm. So if he were to have them bowl contention or, pipe dream kind of 7 or 8 wins, I think that would be a big deal.
Yeah, I would agree. They have a lot of pieces coming from North Texas, and that was a phenomenal team. Drew Mestemaker, be excited to see what he can do. Another question was, what's your, there's a lot of formats for the college football playoff going around, whether the 2, 4, 12, what's the best one? Even I've seen 64, which I don't think is a good idea at all. But out of all the formats we've had or ones thrown around, what would be your perfect format? So it could be the BCS or it could be 4, 12. What would be your perfect format? If you could change it to whatever, what would it be?
Yeah, So the catch 22 here is now that we're at 12, if my perfect ideal was always 6 or 8, it's kind of impossible to go backwards. So if we could go back in time to where no one has experienced postseason expansion, or more importantly, conferences and programs have not baked in the dollars from playoff expansion into their budgets where it makes it impossible to go backwards. If we could go back in time before all that happened, I certainly would love to see us explore 6 or 8. 8 would be my number, by the way, before we went straight from 4 to 12. And the reason is, well, one is obvious. It's too much too soon. And then the second is, if you're reckless enough to skip past 6 and 8 and go straight from 4 to 12, then I don't really trust you to stay at 12. And that's proven to be pretty prophetic. I think a blind man could have seen that coming. And so I think 8 always looked to be a good number. And a lot of, to me at least, a lot of disingenuous arguments to counter that. But I just find at the end of the day, you got difference of opinion. There's some people who genuinely think a bigger playoff is better for the health of college football, or they prefer college football with that kind of fireworks show at the end. That's the main event of the season. And I get why someone would think that way, because that's how the NFL works. That's how pretty much every other sports league in America operates. College football has always been one of one to me. So I never cared that the pinnacle of our sport was the regular season. I actually love that that differs from every other sport. But be that as it may, people like me were in the minority. We lost that battle. So now my next item on the wish list is, can we stay at 12 as long as possible? Or avoid going to 24 and then you settle at 16 or whatever the next fight is. But I don't know. I just, anytime I hear people argue about how good the playoff will be, if it's this size or that size, I always feel like they're starting on chapter 2 of the book. Chapter 1 of the book is, how good is the regular season? And when chapter 2 includes an expanded playoff, it is impacting chapter 1. And chapter 1, for me, in this story, is the most important chapter in the book.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. I was always a 4-team guy. I was like, playoff, like you said, it's not the most important part of the season. Rivalries and those big regular season games are what, in my opinion, is what makes college football, is the Saturdays in the fall. And I feel like it seems like the end goal is 24, which is just not, I don't think that we need that. That's what the Big Ten's pushing for. I've seen some SEC coaches pushing for that. But I do think that 4 was my preferred one. And I agree with everything that you're saying there. And then this kind of ties into this question that we just talked about, was what is one thing that you would change in college football, whether it's the portal or NIL or even the calendar? Like, if you became commissioner like today, what would be the first thing that you would want to change or fix in college football?
Well, how much power would I have?
You could do anything
First
you
off.
want. Anything that's, let's say,
Oh,
realistic.
okay. Well, all right. I'm gonna be very liberal on how we define realistic. So I'm pretty much going to go wherever I want. I would love to alter the current landscape or the current structure of the calendar, which has National Signing Day the week of conference championship games and the transfer portal right in the middle of the playoff. It would be utterly insane to hold the NFL draft and then free agency during the season for the NFL, and yet we do that in college football. And there's a lot more to it than that, and I understand that. But at the same time, just because something's difficult to change doesn't mean you should resist changing if it needs to change. And then the second thing, which is kind of popular talking point as of late, is I love the concept of pooling media rights in college football, which I think bores a lot of people, or it's kind of a turnoff. Like, it sounds really corporate, or it sounds really administrative or bureaucratic or political. I don't care about all that. I'm just a fan. I want my games on Saturday in the fall. Well, hey, man, so am I. That's what I'm talking about, actually. As a fan, and I think most others, when you have this explained to you the right way, would really, really come to love pooling media rights and what that leads to. Okay, it leads to a lot of money for a lot of people, maybe not for us, but for a lot of people. But here's the end game for the fan. Every network covering college football, instead of networks covering conferences, and then that network's studio coverage maybe being more tailored towards promoting a certain conference. And then you get claims of bias here and bias there. And in a lot of cases, it's accurate. And it makes perfect sense. If I got a media rights deal with the Big Ten, why am I going to waste an inordinate amount of time talking about the SEC? It makes no sense logically or financially for me. So I would love to just wipe the slate clean of that being the way that media coverage exists in college football. And then the other part of that is it gives greater variety, much greater variety in how many broadcast crews cover how many different games instead of the Fox crew kind of being pigeonholed into this lane and the ABC crew being pigeonholed into that lane, etc. And then the third thing is, as it relates to the playoff, right now NBC has got no incentive to promote the playoff, nor does Fox. Why would they? They don't have any of those games on their shelves at the end of the year. And in the NFL, it's the exact opposite. Every network knows that they've got a piece of playoff inventory, and the Super Bowl rotates around in that inventory as well. So it's in all of their best interests to promote the NFL because they're in business with the NFL. They're not in business with the AFC West. So I would love to address those two things if I could.
Yeah, I think I'd done a topic on my show, and I was like, why don't we just have like a draft? Like you could draft each week's games. That way you could have Ohio State and Michigan play on Fox, or they could play on on CBS. It would, and that way you'd also get teams like Ohio State to be able to play night games because they played a lot of noon games, and even like Penn State, the whiteout, like that needs to be a night game, and that needs to be against a top team like Oregon every year. So I would agree with that. I would, media rights is a thing that I would love to see change. And then which 2026 game, this kind of goes with the media rights, which 2026 game, regular season, are you most looking forward to? Out of all the games in college football, which one do you have your eye on? Like, that's one that you're going to go to for your tour, or like, which game would be your favorite?
LSU Ole Miss will be really good, but I don't think it gets better than Miami at Notre Dame in Week 10. The one that touches that for me would be Ohio State at Texas, Week 2, Oklahoma, Michigan, same day. But man, Miami, Notre Dame being later in the year kind of does something for me because I've got both teams having already long since figured themselves out. I think this is a late October, early November game, and maybe after Halloween. So you got the cold weather, crisp fall weather, leaves changing. My favorite campus to go to for a game is Notre Dame. It's just an unbelievable. It's like a movie setting. It is kind of a movie set, but it is like the setting for a movie. There just happens to be a football game played there. It's an old school rivalry. It's two teams that are in each other's way of trying to win a national championship. That was the case last year in Week 1 down in Miami. But I just love that thing's later in the year. You can do that when you play Notre Dame because they don't play in a conference, so none of their games are conference games. And if you play them out of conference, you may end up playing them that late in the year. So I've got that one circled, but if you wanted to counter with LSU Ole Miss, Kiffin returning to Oxford, if you wanted to go Ryan Day and Ohio State headed down there to face Sark in Texas Week 2, probably a primetime game, I'm not going to fight you on any of those.
Yeah, I would have to agree. Those are all going to be great games, especially the Ole Miss LSU. I'm just interested to see what Lane Kiffin going back to Ole Miss is, and I'm just interested to see what the fans are going to be like. It's going to be a great atmosphere. All right, just a few more questions just before I get you out of here. I don't want to keep you too long, but what would be your best advice to someone like me or someone that's thinking about getting into sports media or covering college football? What would be your best advice to give to that person?
So my advice would be figure out who you are. My other question that I always ask, which is meant to be a piece of advice, is to ask, why would anyone care what you have to say? And I ask that to everybody. I had it asked to me once upon a time, a long time ago. Not that long ago, but a pretty long time ago to me. It's a very important question. It sounds like someone's being really, really rude, really mean when they ask it, but it's not that at all. We are in the content creation business, and anyone who's talking to us in this form of conversation is looking to get into the content creation business. So, by the very nature of what you're trying to dip your toe into, you believe that you have something to say, you have something to present, you have something to offer that in an ideal world there is an audience for. So who is the audience? The audience is only there if they care what you have to give them, what you have to say, what you have to present. And so before you could ever start producing anything, you better know who you are. So, what are your likes? What are your passion? What are the lanes that you want to fill? Where is the market out there that is underserved based on what you possess the ability to provide? And then the close cousin of that in question form is, why does anybody care? And if you can't answer that question, by the way, you're not alone. Most people can't answer that question, especially if you're just starting out. That doesn't mean stop. That means maybe hold off a second, maybe take a week or two, and instead of just haphazardly throwing stuff against a wall, maybe take time and figure that stuff out. And you formulate something called a plan. And then when you have a plan, then you know where you're going. At least you have a little better direction. The compass is focused and it's pointing somewhere instead of just kind of wildly baselessly guessing on what you're supposed to be doing. And you're kind of playing commentator, you're kind of playing TV host instead of just doing what you should do, which is being yourself.
Yeah, I do think that all is great advice, and I appreciate you guys, or appreciate you giving me that advice. I mean, I'm going to take that and really learn from that. But anyone else who's watching this who wants to get into that business, one last thing here, I wanted to get your thoughts on storm chasing season is upon us. I would assume. What's it like to go storm chasing? Is it like Twister? Like, what's the vibe around storm chasing? What's it like?
Yeah, Twister gets hated on. It shouldn't.
I thought it was a great
It's
movie.
it's American classic, man, and the first one especially. I grew up watching the first one probably once a week. So here's what's really funny about Twister. So people can hate on the atmospheric scientific accuracy of the whole thing, but it's a Hollywood movie, so it is what it is from that perspective. But I always really appreciated that the people who made that movie just totally nailed the culture of storm chasing, the vibe of storm chasing, the experience, because it may be a little dramatized, but it's pretty much a shot for shot make of what it's like out on the road, what it's like chasing with your group, chasing with your boys. You could do it solo. That's fine as well. I mean, some of the best in the business go out there all by themselves, stream all by themselves. But what it's like is if you are cut from a different cloth, it's exhilarating. If you're a normal person, it's terrifying, and you shouldn't do it. Most people shouldn't do it. Most people have no business. We really shouldn't do it, but we're drawn to it, which is kind of funny because I grew up. I mean, I didn't even ride a roller coaster till I was like 25 or so. Scared of big water slides, and yet somehow I'm drawn to things that could actually do harm to you, as opposed to those which are theme park rides. But it's an amazing thing, and when you witness just the sheer power, the magnitude of weather at its most extreme, it really humbles you. It makes you feel about that big right there. But also occasionally what you find is since you're out there kind of putting yourself in harm's way voluntarily, you also end up in a situation where you're the first there to help someone when they need help. We've been in that position a number of times. So there's part thrill seeking, there's part information gathering, content providing. You could be out there for a number of reasons, but it could turn into search and rescue just like that. So it is a very, very unique experience.
Yeah, I gotta say, I've never seen like a tornado or anything, but I do think that it would be fascinating to just observe it. I think weather is something that's very cool. I do have to say now, do you go solo normally, or do you take someone, or like how does that? Do you take a group, or do you go with other people, or like what's your group look like when you go, or do you go solo?
I've done it all different ways. So everything you just mentioned, I've done. I don't do it solo anymore. What I'll do is here's what ended up happening. So when I was growing up, I was dead broke. I couldn't go anywhere. I could probably had to chase within like a 2 hour radius of my house. And then when I was in my 20s, same. And then when I started thinking about doing what I do now for a living, my whole goal was twofold. One of them was to create the biggest college football show in the world and become synonymous with the sport doing what I love to do. All right, that's goal number one, but we'll put that off to the side for a second. Goal number two was create a college football platform so big and hopefully so successful, so profitable that we can then venture into the weather space. And for me, that's going to end up taking on many different forms. But really, what I intended it for at the time is I just want to be free to go wherever I want to in the spring. I want to be able to afford an airline ticket if I need to, afford gas, afford food, hotel, go wherever I want. So that's what we achieved. And then a nice little side effect of the show becoming as big as it did is I talk about storm chasing on the show, and I'd look in my Twitter DMs or I'd look in my email inbox or whatnot, and I would start getting DMs from storm chasers who just happened to watch the show. And they would say, hey, this happened to me like a dozen times or more. They would say, hey, are you serious? Do you really want to do this? Come with us, man. Join us. And so like some of the biggest names in storm chasing, a lot if you follow storm chasing, names that you would recognize, I just go hang out with them. I'll just kind of link up with them. If they're in Wichita, I'll just fly up to Wichita, meet them. We'll end up driving back to Nashville over the course of a chase. So it's funny, I got linked up with all my friends in storm chasing because of the show. Because believe it or not, there is heavy overlap between people who love college football and people who storm chase.
Yeah, that's very interesting. One more thing before we get you out of here. I heard rumors that the Bussin' Boys were going to go storm chasing. Is that happening, or were they going to back out? What's the status of that?
I'm looking at a text right now because one of them just sent me something. I will go back yesterday. I told him yesterday, modeling over the next 3 weeks looks really impressive over anywhere from the plains all the way down to northern Mississippi, Alabama. So I told them we're about to find out if you're serious, and we are. We're about to find out if they're serious. That I've met many people who say they're ready and who say they want it, and those guys say they're ready and they say they want it. We're going to find out over the month of April. How badly do Will Compton and Taylor Lewan want it? I got confidence in them. I got confidence in them that they'll follow through. But yeah, the plan is for the three of us and maybe another friend or two to be out there somewhere, Kansas, Oklahoma, who knows, but chasing.
Well, I think that would be interesting. Well, I want to thank you for coming on to my channel. This is unbelievable. I've been watching you for the past 3 years. You're basically the reason I started this YouTube channel making content. And everything you've done for college football is just bringing everyone in, whether they didn't watch college football and they watched your show and they're like, wow, this is one of the best sports in the world. And it is. It's truly the best sport in the world. So I want to thank you and congratulate you on all your successes. And I want to thank you for coming on to my show. I really appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate you saying it. I appreciate you having me. And I've seen a lot of your stuff actually and got a lot of respect for it. And I think it'll be fun for you as you continue to look back on yourself 2 years, 5 years, 7 years down the road and watch the natural maturation process that happens. It's really crazy the way it works. But you're right where you need to be. So keep it up.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate you. All right, that's Josh Pate, everybody. Thank you very much for coming on the show.
Yes, sir.